Hi everyone, welcome. I'm going to get the business out of the way first and thank our sponsors, Ferring Pharmaceuticals, Pamela Hirsch, and Baby Quest Foundation. And I know we would love for you to continue the conversation after this session and after the expo, so if you could be sure to post on Facebook or tweet. And of course, everyone has a hashtag, and Fertility Planit does as well. So it's hashtag FPLA14. So thanks. When Karen Thayer, who organized this whole event, first contacted me about having a chat with Elisabeth Rohm, I was so excited for two reasons. The first one is I'm a journalist here in LA, and I had my own struggles with fertility a couple of years ago. And so I'm very close to the topic, and I in fact wrote an article for Los Angeles Magazine. And when that article came out, I got such an outpouring from women and men and heard from so many people, more than any other article I've ever written. And I'm sure Elisabeth will say the same when she talks about the response to her book, Baby Steps. So I was very excited. And quickly, you know, when I turned 30, I'd gotten married at 38, and I said to a girlfriend, oh, we're thinking of having kids. And she said to me, well, you need to stop thinking and start trying. You're 40. And it just hadn't occurred to me. And I like to think of myself as a pretty informed woman, particularly being a journalist. And so I started trying. And then I met with a fertility specialist. And, you know, the statistics were daunting. And 3 IVFs and a couple of miscarriages later, I conceived my daughter, a healthy girl. She's 3.5 now, Tess Darling Harrell, so I hope I can be an inspiration to you. The second reason I was so excited to interview Elisabeth is because having gone through that struggle, I know how isolating it can be and how alone you can feel. And sometimes it's just a matter of going to a cocktail party or lunch and talking to someone about it, and you just feel so nurtured because it's just a very singular plight in a lot of ways, and hopefully that's changing. So I just found it so brave that Elisabeth wrote a book. I mean, she's a high-profile actress. It's hard to talk about at the dinner table, let alone to write a book. And her book is so frank and funny and direct and no nonsense. And she really told it all, and I'm so impressed. So I was excited to speak with you for that reason.
Thank you.
So welcome, Elisabeth.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Elisabeth was just in American Hustle, which I hope we all saw, and won the Best Picture Oscar, so congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Why don't we start by having you tell us what inspired you to write Baby Steps?
Well, similarly to you, I write a blog for people and have had this really incredible fun journey of having straight talk with women, which I really value. And I'd say around the time that I decided that I was living with a secret and that I was suffering under the pressure of that secret, and that I was doing no good to anyone by keeping the secret, I decided to blog about it. And really, I have to say, probably it was one of my most clumsy blogs. It was really short and like, you know, I was just like, blah, you know, here it is. And I couldn't believe the response. I mean, it was really mind-blowing. It trended at #1 on Yahoo all day long that I had infertility issues. I mean, I really couldn't believe it. I was like, uh-oh. You know? But then it began this incredible journey of having this extended relationship with mostly with women, and yes, men have reached out to me too, but mostly with women and their journey, and it's a privilege. And you know, like you said, I mean, all these, you know, outpouring of letters of women's experiences, of the confusion, of the feelings of not knowing what to do, where to go next, you know, and being on that roller coaster of just, your raw nerve emotions of like, how did this happen to you? That is really what started the idea of writing Baby Steps. And unlike you, I had a less arduous journey in my pregnancy. I did 2 rounds of hormone treatments, and I did 1 transfer, and I got pregnant through, doing IVF once. So that was a blessing. But it came from an unusual circumstance, which is that I found out that I had fertility issues at 34 because I went to the gynecologist and I asked to be tested. I asked to be tested, my hormone levels and my fertility levels, because someone had told me that they had missed the boat on Parenthood, and that if I really wanted to have children, like your
Right.
friend said, stop talking about it and start trying it, because you are running out of time, and those are just the bare bone facts. So I did something unusual, I think, at 34, and I went to the OBGYN and I said, will you test me? And then we found out that I was barreling into early menopause, which was really too bad for me at 34, and is not going to be the common case, but it was the case with me. And then I had to make the decision to be proactive. And so my book is a lot about my journey in becoming a mother, and stepping up to that plate, in a million different ways. And the book is about, I think, a lot of different parts of my life. But the genesis of writing it was to kind of get the conversation started about fertility issues and the stigma of it, and why one night I was sitting in New York at a family dinner, and one of my cousins was telling me about her 8th miscarriage and sort of just celebrating my pregnancy. And I thought, how can I sit here and listen to this story and not tell her the truth? I mean, she's so happy for me, and she's so devastated in her life. How can I sit here and not share this with her? And I told her, and it was like this relief I couldn't believe that she had, like, the relief you see when someone read the blog or your experience. And I thought, well, we need to start talking about this, because people aren't talking about this. And perhaps I didn't talk about it as well because I was ashamed that I had a broken body, and I was keeping it to myself, and I was living with it as such, which I think all of that needs to be reversed and sort of refocused in a way that we have a deeper understanding of what infertility is. And
I'm curious, you bring up the subject being taboo, and particularly in Hollywood, and we'll get to that later. Did anyone counsel you against writing a book and revealing that?
I didn't really reach out, I guess, on advice for that, other than to go to Dr. Sahakian, my fertility doctor, who celebrated my desire to have women be open about it, and really shared with me his experience as a doctor, how these women walk into this office and they're behind the 8 ball. And nobody has told them the statistics. Nobody's told them what begins to happen to your body at 35, or what definitely is going to begin to happen to your body at 40. And see, now we're in a new generation where women they're going to school, they're waiting for love, they're developing, they're deepening as women, they're finding their identity, they're earning motherhood. And that all takes time as we deepen and we grow. And tick, 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 tock, 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 and suddenly, you're like 38, and that's just a beautiful age, but you're now beginning to go into a very, very, a big gray zone for motherhood. And so I'm hearing his stories, and I'm inspired by his stories, and then I think, well, we have to, if we could just do one thing, if we could just inform the reproductive generation of one thing, that at 30, it is important that they become advocates for themselves, to go to the OBGYN and ask these questions, and then we'll suddenly see, younger women not barreling into these, infertility blindly.
One aspect of your book that is so wonderful is how you're very candid about the emotions that you went through. What was your reaction when you found out in going to see someone at 34 and finding out that your FSH levels were high, I believe, and how did you feel emotionally? Let's talk about that moment, because I think everyone can relate to finding that out and what goes through your mind and your heart.
Well, I'm not one for a pity party, but I will say that I was like, of course, this had to happen to me, and like, hasn't life been challenging in all these other areas, and why this one thing, all I wanted to do, I mean, I knew it, like, as a teenager, that I couldn't wait to be a mom. Are you kidding me? Like, this is not happening. And, luckily, I was so eager to be a parent that I didn't wait. I did not go from one doctor to the next. I didn't go see the doctor of my choice and then decide to wait another year and keep trying. I mean, I was like hell-bent on having that child. And so I would advise people to be that way, because if you're seeing these indications, they're real and they're only going to get worse. And so they're not to be ignored. But I was devastated. It was, I felt as if I was the most unlucky woman in the world. And I just think that if you have your heart set on being a parent, it is just like, the earth being pulled out from underneath you. And, you're going to go on a journey that's going to be pretty treacherous, because you're not going to know if it's going to work out, and you want it bad. And that, I know, is going to be the journey, and so it's very emotional. And you have to then find your way to create positivity and the silver lining and and never give up hope in what feels like a pretty hopeless situation. So the bigger issue is to how to encourage women to not get into, not walk into that experience at all, but if you are walking into it, to be tender and sweet to yourself, to be patient and kind, because it's not a guarantee that you're going to be a mom, but it is what you want, and there is help, and there is medical help, and there are great doctors who can make it happen for you. But you have to be proactive for yourself, because you are running out of time, and it's important to become your greatest advocate. So that means also being your greatest advocate emotionally, and knowing, as I've gone through this journey, that we have each other, and that we have each other to lean on, and that we're going to take this subject out of the closet and we're going to put it in the light so we can all talk about it and help each other to not miss the opportunity of parenthood.
You talk about staying positive, and we all know how stressful dealing with fertility issues can be. I mean, incredibly stressful. I think it was probably the hardest time in my life. And what I loved in your book also is that you stayed positive and optimistic. For instance, there's a passage in which Elisabeth and her fiance Ron are just starting IVF, and she said to him, "Should we be thinking about baby names?" And he said, "I think it's a little early." But that kind of optimism really kept you afloat, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just knew that I was going to be someone's mother. Mm-hmm. And that was just the way it was going to be. And that meant that I would do whatever it took to be the mother of this biological child I hope to have. But I knew that if that wasn't to be, I was going to be someone's mother. Mm-hmm. And that I was committed to. So I knew at the end of the day I was not going to be without a child in my life. So it was okay to have all the hope in the world. But I do think that does help you. Like even, when we did the retrieval, when we did the transfer, we played at Dr. Sakian's office, we played the right music and all of it, the acupuncturist was there. And I think it's all great, and you have to do that because this is your shot, and you've spent a lot of money, and you're investing in this family. You have to support yourself in every possible way.
Do you have any tips for how you stayed upbeat? Was there anything that you did, any routines that you developed, or any mantras, or anything that just helped you along?
Again, I just wasn't going to take no for an answer. And that was a big one for me. I mean, again, treating myself very kindly, enjoying, the process, with my partner, and not letting it tear us apart, really coming together, which was humiliating at times, because again, you take for granted that you're going to be able to have a child, and that is what makes you divinely female. We have so many differences as men and women, but one of the big ones is that, we can make babies. And when you can't do that for the love of your life, you can't do that for your partner, and they have to become a part of your science experiment, it creates a lot of vulnerability in the relationship, a lot of lack of sexuality, and a lot of pressure. Mm-hmm. Ron was under a lot of pressure, and I then took that pressure on. Mm-hmm. And so you have to do the work to stay really good with each other and good with yourself. So whatever that is for you. Like for me, it was, enjoying my family and doing things for my body and being with my friends and finding the laughter and all of that, because I wasn't sure if I was going to end up with a child that was biological or not.
Yeah, there's really that sense of being out of control. We're actually going to open the forum to questions at the end, so save those questions and be thinking as we chat. You talk about your doctor, and we're going to have Dr. Sahakian come up at the end to talk a bit, but I want to get into how important your fertility doctor can be. I know you saw a doctor, the first doctor you saw didn't work out for you, wasn't the right fit, and your fertility doctor really becomes more than a clinical specialist. It's an emotion. He or she
They're
is an
your
emotional
therapist,
an
right?
emotional touchstone. Yeah, a therapist for you. Can you talk about that relationship and how important it is to find someone that you feel a kinship with emotionally?
Yeah, I think it's worth the search, you know. You don't want to get to the point where you're not liking anybody and running more and more out of time. But I did go to one doctor, and I just felt completely uncomfortable. It was like the Hollywood, like Taj Mahal, his office, and I was just like, this isn't going to work for me. And then I went and I met with another doctor, Dr. Sakian, and for me what worked, and it's personal for everybody, but I needed to be nurtured. My mother lived in Europe at the time. My father was in New York. I needed a friend, a parent, a therapist, you know, a rabbi, the whole thing, you know, like I needed to have that really nurturing relationship because I didn't know how it was going to go. And I wanted to be handled with care. And you end up becoming, you're creating a family with that person too. So that was important for me to feel very safe. And in the end, you know, I've become friends with my doctor, you know, because, you know, you expose yourself in such a way that, you know, you kind of, you have an unusual relationship that you don't really have with anybody else.
What was most surprising that you learned from him when you sat down? Was there anything about fertility, either a misconception or something that just shocked you?
Yeah, I mean, especially as I started to embark on writing the book, you know, and having to go out and really talk about it. I mean, the statistics of how hard it is to get pregnant, you know, once you reach 35 and once you reach 40. I mean, you know, once you reach your 40s, it's in the, you know, it's in the thousands. Every, you know, 1 in 1,000 women will get pregnant naturally. I mean, so it was an unusual circumstance that I was 34, but it's not that unusual. So we want to encourage women who are of the reproductive generation that are in their, you know, turning 30, that they're realizing that they're just like me.
Right. So many actresses are having babies later in life. Halle Berry just had her second child at 47. And typically we don't hear much about reproductive assistance. Why is it such a taboo subject in Hollywood? Why do you feel, first of all, it's personal, so I understand that. We all understand that. But why do you think so many women are reticent to talk about it?
Well, I think, you know, just from a positive point of view, I think that if you are a public figure in whatever you do, you kind of have a responsibility to, I think, lead the conversation and get out there and start, you know, drumming on the drums, so to speak. Because, you know, that's what we're here to do for each other, is to be of service to each other and to help each other. And that to me is the most humane way to live. But yes, I think people who are also in the public eye, they tend to take certain parts of their lives and they make them sacred, as they should, because there's very little of that. So I can understand that too. But I think the sin of omission comes a lot from you know, vanity and protecting your age and not wanting people to know about your age. And, you know, once you start having fertility issues, it is an indication that you're, you know, barreling into your 40s. And so the perpetuation of the myth, of the fantasy, you know, becomes a little bit more revealed. And, you know, I also think that it takes away your, you know, I think there, and this is the one that really affects me the most, is that it takes away your femininity. This sort of, you know, idea of like what an actress is, you know, this sensual creature or something. It's like, well, if you're having to go to a doctor and get, you know, help to have a baby, like, you're not so feminine, are you, right? You're feeling that feeling. That, to me, on the day that I found out that I was going to have to do IVF, was a big one for me. It's the one that tackled the relationship the most, was like my lack of femininity and my self-image. And so I think when, you know, women struggle with fertility, they feel that. And so if you're someone who kind of is an actress and has that femininity as part of, you know, your whole, I don't know, persona, you take away from that. It's why I think a lot of people keep their private life closeted to a certain extent.
Did you turn to friends and family, and when you felt like that sense of your femininity was compromised, what did you do to like reinstill in yourself that confidence? And I mean, when you started to feel, it's hard not to feel the shame that society, and again, it's changing, but there is that association with infertility. Was there anything that you did, or any books you turned to, or?
I think I've always kind of had the personality of burying myself in my work, like in the action, so I tended to avoid a lot of my feelings by being, having tunnel vision with Dr. Sahakian in our family, and that is where I put a lot of my pain. And not until after, when I was with that family member, did I realize that I was living with a secret, because Ron and I had decided as a family to keep it to ourselves. Well, why were we doing that? Was there something wrong with me? And so that was something I had to sort of unravel in our relationship. Like, well, why did we decide to do that? I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with me. And luckily I sort of, had, I think a great mother who really, encouraged me to feel feminine and good no matter what. And so, I think, again, it goes back to motherhood, doesn't it? Having good mothers and being good mothers and wanting to be mothers, but mine was amazing. And the book actually also talks about my mom passing away, which she did when Easton was 2, and she's now 6. So there's been this big sort of journey of, figuring out who I am through trying to have this child. And I think, so again, when you're dealing with these issues of fertility, I mean, you're being challenged to really know what you're made of, and what your relationship is made of. And you're being challenged, your identity is being challenged. As a woman, you're now having to deal with the fact that you may not be able to have a child. And that is part of your identity, isn't it? You see yourself as that, you want to have this child, and you have to, work, I think, hard to understand that if you can't, and you want to be someone's mother, you can have any kind of modern family. There are children that need love all over the world, and you are not going to be out of motherhood. But it may not happen in the way that you dreamed of it. And so again, bringing these subjects up so we can support each other to have these modern families, because life is changing,
I'm so glad you bring that up, because I felt that same way. What I found most reassuring was that I knew that my husband and I could have a family. It may not have been the route we had hoped for. Maybe it wasn't the romantic, having sex on the beach and getting pregnant, but, and maybe it wouldn't even be a biological child, but we could start a family. It's out there, it's available, and that really kept me going as well. But I want to read something from the book, and
it's really up to your partner to help you feel feminine as your world is shattering. You know what I mean? I could say like the pat answer, well, throw on a pair of heels and make sure you go to your yoga class, but it's really up to your partner to sort of man up or woman up to the job of making you feel feminine enough to go through the process, of feeling like God, like this thing I took for granted, this God-given gift, it may not be my gift. And so they have a lot of burden on them too. And you have to help them, I think.
I agree, which brings me to, I'm going to read from Elisabeth's book, Baby Steps, and these are the first lines of the introduction, and I said that it's frank and it's funny. Here we go. His penis got soft at the mere mention of it. You're going to write about fertility? You're going to write about IVF, he said. He practically cupped his hands over his crotch like I was going to kick him in the balls. So Elisabeth is speaking of a discussion she had with Ron, and I think that really sums up the tricky navigation we have with our partners when it comes to fertility. And I'm wondering, you spoke so eloquently about your partner helping you with the femininity issues, and just how important it is that you maintain, you're a team. You have to be a team. What did you and Ron do to make sure that you stuck together?
Well, the thing that you discover sometimes, or at least we did, is that I discovered that I felt like he had this selfish reaction of feeling like, people would think like he was less less than a man, if we weren't having sex on the beach, in order to conceive this child, and like, let's just keep it with ourselves and our family, and it's our privacy. And it's like, you understand that point of view, and you realize both of you are going through it. Like you're not having intercourse to have this child. You're going to a doctor and you're getting medical help because one of you has a disease. It's called infertility, and so that was interesting because it was really supposed to be all about me. And I had to discover that he had a voice and he had feelings in this, and he had, this need to be, manly and like, seen as, someone who was capable of making a baby, And so we really had a lot to go through, I mean, there were lots of ups and downs, and having compassion for each other, and eventually he, really got behind the book and really got behind Easton's story being out there, and, and knowing that it could help people. But I think we were both really humbled, when I started to talk about it more openly, how much women would reach out and ask me for, advice on where to go to a doctor, or because now I'm in this world, perhaps maybe where to go to a doctor in New York or whatever. So, then he began to see that it was important.
Can you talk about the reaction to the book in terms of letters that you received, and just were you surprised by the outpouring from women?
Yeah, one of the things that I thought was amazing was as I went on the book tour and did talk shows, that every single talk show I went to, a woman would, when we were done talking about it, would take my arm and say, "You want to see my IVF baby?" In every place I went, and I thought, it's really a generational issue, This is what's happening to us now, because of some of the things we were talking about, having our careers, starting a little later, not even knowing 38 could possibly be too old, because no one's talking about it. So that was amazing, just to see how relevant the issue was. I mean, we're sitting here, it's such a small group of people, but there's so many others who, are sort of living in silence with this private pain,
And you talk about in the book the benefit of telling your story. What's been the biggest benefit for you?
I think having deeper connection with women. I mean, I love women, and I value communication, and I want to have a deeper, more meaningful connection with women, and I think that's why I write the blog, and I think it's a privilege to be able to share this journey. I think with this generation, because I think we can turn the tides, we can make a change, we can make this issue not have a stigma, and one day, just like when people were not, doing breast exams, and now suddenly there's such a consciousness about it. It's about creating a higher consciousness around an issue, and together that's what we're here to do. And I think that is really an exciting idea, because there will come a time when it's a much bigger conversation than this beautiful small one right here.
Okay. I think we'd love to have Dr. Sahakian come up and join us for the Q&A. We're going to open up.
I just want to clarify one thing. We did put the family together, but we used Ron's sperm. It was not mine.
And also,
one thing perfectly clear, yes.
the doctor's going to be leading a 4 o'clock panel discussion on egg donation. So keep that in mind. Any questions? Yes.
No, I heard you. Yeah, no, I had a lot of support from the right doctor. I mean, I didn't go and see a therapist during that time. But again, I think if you find the right physician, they have the time to talk to you and sort of guide you a little bit emotionally through the journey. And, and I have a very open way of being. So with my friends and family, I really reached out to,
She's a therapist, actually. She could be the therapist.
So yeah, no, I didn't, but I did reach out for help. Were they what? Right. There's a lack of everything, right?
Right. Do you think there would be a lack of services or resources? Like, oh, you're having maybe
No, I wouldn't say that it was offered to me. I mean, I think I was educated on, having, support, during my pregnancy. But during the journey of being not pregnant and trying to get pregnant, there really wasn't, nor is it affordable to do any of this, right? So again, we're talking about some bigger issues that we hope are going to change, just besides the consciousness of it, but also, that it could be covered through medical insurance and that there would just be a greater sense of this being a really relevant issue.
Doctor, can you talk a little bit about how you've seen the landscape change? Are you seeing more young women coming in now who are better informed about the realities of reproduction and their fertility?
Sure. First, how beautiful was this? I mean, you're just amazing. Seriously, because the way you talk and the way you express your feelings, it's in a forum like this is just amazing. Just if you think about it, how simple this is. Her revealing this information, an actress who goes on the news and say, listen, I couldn't get pregnant, I did IVF. It cannot take the place of 100,000 OBGYNs telling their patients, go test for it. Because women will relate to this. They'll say, oh my God, she's brave enough to do this. And they'll hear it, they'll read the book. And I think it's vicious. And this is going to bring much more awareness than any medical forum. We certainly see more awareness. There's no question that I've been doing this for 23 years, and we see more and more younger women seeking help, checking. I get emails, women asking, what can I do to check for fertility? There's definitely change in that. It's very easy to test. It's nothing. If you think about it, it's a simple blood test and ultrasound. Within a day, if you have a problem, if you need to move faster, or you have the luxury of waiting a few years. We see a lot of women now in their 40s who actually, unfortunately, have missed the boat on their own fertility, but they see that there's a world out there of becoming a mother through egg donation. So there's more awareness, and there's more and more women seeking help. And one last thing is, women don't realize that looking good, feeling good, and going to yoga and exercising and looking younger through Botox or whatever doesn't affect your ovaries. Your ovaries are aging every day. So I think that's the message that needs to go out there.
Do you have any questions?
Thanks. It's really cool that you're using the word fertility instead of infertility. Do you think the reason, because infertility is used in a negative way, do you think that's the reason why lots more people in your position don't come out and talk about it?
My position or his
Your position. Sorry, Elisabeth, your position.
Yeah, I do. But one of the things that was really a relief to me as I went out with the book, because this is always an ever-moving subject, right? I found out that what I really have is a disease, and it's really not that complicated. Like, if you have a disease, you can go to a doctor and you can take care of, your medical concern and get better, and there should really be no stigma attached to any disease. And in this particular case, the idea that the masses don't look at fertility issues as a disease, they just see it as a woman who can't have a baby. This is, we want to create more education on the subject, so that people from many different points of view, many different walks of life can look at fertility or infertility issues as something that is a disease and should be treated as such.
It's not contagious.
It's not contagious.
It's not contagious.
And you can still have a baby.
Thank you.
You speak of this as a disease, like obesity is a disease now recognized by insurance companies. Why hasn't the government or the insurance companies cover any of this IVF? You have very few insurance companies covering these cycles. If they classify it as disease, it should be covered under insurance. What's going on with legislation about this or anything?
It does have an ICD-9 code and the medical diagnosis code, so it is classified as a disease.
So why don't a lot of insurance cover it?
I think it's because
There's such a stigma attached to it, Perhaps if a woman can't have a child naturally, then she shouldn't, or something. These sort of archaic thoughts.
Has anybody gone and talked to the government, or is there a bill on
Yes.
plan or anything?
Yes, we
it's-
are.
You're depleting people's life savings to get a child. I mean, it's really tough.
Yeah, it should be much more accessible.
Yes.
There are bills, I know, they haven't made it very far, but I know that there is legislation.
But that's why we're saying, you know, especially if you have a voice publicly, whatever it may be, in whatever field you're in, it is a sin of omission at a time where there needs to be a tidal wave of change. To keep quiet, I
And-
think is
And
doesn't
some
serve.
states do cover it. You know, New York covers it. So
New York covers it.
yeah, so there are some states who actually have an insurance mandate to cover infertility. They put limitations, and like if you're over 40, I think they won't pay for it or etc. But there are some states who've taken the lead on that. It's unfortunate. It's just a minuscule number of.
Yeah, like Obamacare, this is, you know, about is it maternity coverage or birth control pills or lobbying against that one company doesn't want to, you know, cover it. It doesn't make sense.
Well, when 15 to 20% of your population has that disease, that's a very common disease.
Yeah.
You got to cover it.
Hello, I'm Tamika Hines, Elisabeth. You and I were on the Katie Couric show together, and I also am afflicted with this disease of infertility, and I will be speaking with Dr. Sahakian at the next session. But I wanted to just applaud you for speaking out publicly. I too, especially for the African American community, not to exclude anyone here, but that community is. There's so much shame and stigma, and my husband and I chose to speak out on behalf of other African American people that are dealing with this. We did have twin boys via an anonymous egg donor, so I'm very happy to say that, but I just wanted to really publicly acknowledge you. I didn't get to speak with you at the show, but I am your sister in this, and I will be writing a book as well and speaking out because we do need, we spent all of our life savings. I'm so happy that we did. We have these children, but I wish we didn't have to.
Right.
So I just wanted to applaud you and
Thank
just
you.
thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Another question, piggybacking on that. I'm more distant from this world, and I'm just learning. So, like, I'm not as knowledgeable as some people in this room. But for the common person who makes maybe 50, 60 grand, how much would that be a burden or a struggle? Because I don't know what financial class you're in, but it seems like you did have funds. So, for someone who makes like the average salary, how accessible is something like this for a common Joe or Mary?
I don't think accessible. And
Not-
I
not
don't,
at all?
and I think if you're gonna have a journey like she had, where she did it 3 times, you know, like where the conversation is a much bigger and more, you know, important conversation because, you know, this is not affordable and it can create financial ruin. People mortgage their houses to have these children, and this really is unacceptable.
And there's no end point. That's what's scary. It's
Yeah.
not like you're having a surgery, you're taking, I don't know, a tumor out and you're cured. If it doesn't work, gone. You got to do it again or you got to do something else. So there's no end point.
And if you want a second child, you know, so to create this family, you know, it should be taken care of.
So it's very high.
Very high.
Okay.
I think very high.
Very
Thanks.
expensive.
Why is it so high that, you know, families can't do it?
The treatment is high tech, so it's really expensive to do an IVF cycle because it's really you need highly technical trained individual who have to be paid a lot of money to do what they're doing. So it's not just your doctor. Doctor is half of the equation, and then you have this IVF lab that involves expensive equipment. The drugs is sometimes half the cost of the treatment.
Elisabeth, I would love for you to talk about, on an up note, when you're in the thick of this, it's so difficult. Your vision's clouded. It's really hard to see the horizon. But then you come out of it, and fortunately, you conceived Easton, and I had a baby. And like we said, there is a family to be had out there for you. Can you talk a little bit about the other side and how some of the agony that you go through just kind of disappears, and it does get better, and it changes you, but it also is something that, when I think about having done 3 IVFs and having a couple of miscarriages, very grueling, but once you get to that other side, it really does sort of slip off of you. As hard as that might be to imagine when you're going through it, you just feel okay.
Yeah.
I know. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a getting to the other side of everything in life, and, certainly if you're blessed to have that child, there's a melting away of the struggle. But for those that maybe don't get to have that, this is something they'll endure. And so I think that, it's how you deal with it in the moment, not at the end. I think not at the beginning, but during it, and how you have it, how your outlook on your life is, and yourself and your marriage, is what you have to cultivate, because there are no guarantees.
How has it affected, you talk about baby lust in your book, how has it affected your role as a mom now, a working mom? Do you find that motherhood takes on, I don't want to say a greater importance, but when you really have to work to be a mom, it's different from just saying, oh, maybe we'll have kids, and then it comes to you easily. This is a little more hard won.
Oh, yeah. I think, I mean, you could call me a hoverer, but I'm working on that. I don't want her to break, because she really cost a fortune. And there was only one of her and 4 embryos. So, okay, nothing can happen to her. But I'm working on that, okay? It affects certainly the preciousness, and so I'm working on that.
You can never take her for granted. That's
No,
for sure.
no.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Do we have any other questions?
Sure. How do you know?
It appears from your story with the man who...
Moving on.
Do you know any people who might be gay or lesbian, and do you think that might even be a bigger struggle with the stigma, let alone of infertility, like you mentioned, with the gay and lesbian on top of that?
Absolutely. I have many friends who've had to do IVF, many female friends of mine who are in marriages with women. And again, I don't want them to pay for it either. And they also have to go through their emotional journey. And, again, all of the age issues relate to them as well. And so to manifest love is hard enough in this life. And many of us do it later because we've become more mature enough to have it. And so, again, it's like Dr. Sakian said, you may be looking great, but your body is not necessarily cooperating with that. So this is a universal issue, and in a world where the modern family is at the forefront, this is something we all have to come together on.
Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone. And I just want to reiterate that we had this great discussion. Let's continue the conversation. Hashtag FPLA14. Tweet, get on Facebook. Turn to the person next to you and introduce yourself and talk for 5 more minutes. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Elisabeth. Her book is Baby Steps. And thank you, Dr. Sahakian from Pacific Fertility Center. Am I butchering your name?
You did, but
A little
bit.
Dr. S.
Sahakian.
Sahakian.
Find him in the phone book.
Exactly.
Thank you all.
Thank you.